Computer. Okay. Hi, everybody, and welcome to the show. I am so excited today to be introducing you to Phil Graham. Phil, how are you?
How are you, Rachel? I'm great, thank you.
I'm good. You're in Belfast, aren't you? What's the weather doing there?
Belfast, Northern Ireland, and it is currently raining outside.
Raining. It's always raining in Belfast. Whenever I go to Belfast, it's raining.
It is indeed.
I'm really looking forward to this interview. So, first of all, I always ask everybody who comes on the show, let's have the backstory. Give me the dirty details about you, where you've come from. Why does everybody know you? You're really exciting on social media. You've got great messages to say. So, let's hear it all, Phil.
Okay, well, let's roll back to when I was 16 years of age. And if you looked at my lifestyle then, compare it to now, it was dramatically different. So when I was 16, I was overweight, I was inactive, I played too much N64, and safe to say, mother gave me too many ready meals and stuff from Marks and Spencer's that really was pretty high in calories and drove me into a state of being overweight. I didn't participate in sport. As I said, I was inactive, and I wasn't in any way, shape or form healthy. And I remember going to school one day on the bus. Now, I'm getting to the point here. I literally remember looking out the window, and number plates of cars were very blurry. And over time, it began to get progressively worse. And I started going to the toilet more, and I started to lose weight unexpectedly. And I said to my mom, I said to everyone else, I don't feel right. Something doesn't feel good. And long story short, I ended up going to the doctor and was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. So I had to make a dramatic change in my lifestyle overnight. And with type 1 diabetes, the main elements of control are medication and lifestyle. Now, we also have type 2 diabetes, which we'll talk about in due course, but that's mostly lifestyle related. There is medication in the advanced stages of that. But with type 1, I literally had to change my ways and means. So there was no more Kit Kats for lunch. There was planned exercise and planned physical activity. It became part of my week, it became part of my norm. And long story short, I became engrossed, obsessed really with my health. I became obsessed with physiology. I became obsessed with anatomy. I became obsessed with diabetes. And I literally drove myself to the gym, lost all my weight, transformed my health, mastered the control of my diabetes, and then I went into further academic education. I went to study nutrition, I went to study human physiology in university, public health, I worked in the health service. So diabetes drove me towards all of this. And at the same time, I was also competing as a competitive bodybuilder at a very young age, at 19 to around about 23. I competed all over the world and won numerous competitions. Mr. Britain, Mr. Universe, Mr. Northern Ireland. I competed in all of those competitions and reached a very high level for my age when I was told that stepping on stage as a bodybuilder was next to impossible with diabetes. Yeah. So for those of you that don't understand diabetes from a fitness perspective, with all of you guys wanting to get lean and build a lot of muscle, diabetes is a big, big hindrance to that, because diabetes is a catabolic muscle breakdown disease that increases your fat gain potential. And the reason for that is because you use exogenous insulin, that hormone that your body fails to produce. And we'll get into all of that in due course. But so basically, I was at a big disadvantage, but I learnt everything that I needed to know about managing diabetes, about controlling all of that. And I was able to sail in and do my competitions and obviously take away some silverware and goldware. So I was happy enough with that. And basically, what happened from there is, I became obsessed with fitness. I started talking about it a lot. And I left the health service and I started my own personal training business, quite simply because I was being asked by so many people to train them, to coach them, to do diet programs, all of that kind of stuff. That's literally because, one, I was talking about nutrition and training left, right, and center. I had physical proof of it. 3, as well, I also had an academic qualification for it, so people were recognizing that as credible. And we didn't have any social media. I didn't know what marketing meant. I didn't know what business meant. And I was just like, yeah, sure, I'll train you. And from there, that turned into plenty of clients, beginning to lose lots of weight, talk to other people. And the fitness industry thing was sort of starting back then, whenever it was the whole fitness models were coming in. And I trained the first fitness model in Northern Ireland. The first fitness model competition actually occurred around about 8, maybe 10 years ago now. So, you know, it was literally adversity in disguise as a blessing. So, it drove me into a lot. I've been personal training for around about, since I was 18. So on top of that, studying nutrition in university, working in the health service. And now I've just retired from personal training. I'm just turned 29 now, just to make you aware of that. So I'm now educating trainers, and I coach them predominantly in nutrition, and also as well how to run and build a successful fitness.
What a fascinating journey. That's amazing.
Yeah, that all stemmed from, something that was meant to be, life-ending, and as I say, it hasn't, I've never taken a serious issue with my diabetes. I've never had a serious lapse.
Yeah.
There's not once that I never looked at diabetes I never got depressed about it. I never got down about it. I dealt with it, and I took action with it. And I think that's a big, big thing to maybe take from this for those of you that aren't diabetic as well. It's about how you look at adversity and how you, first of all, take distance from it, look at it and go, right, how can I maybe craft and turn myself into something different and use this to my advantage? Mm-hmm. So now I'm literally serving more people. I'm doing something that I love. I don't work. And, the book that I've recently just written, I never actually wanted to write that book, believe it or not, Rachel. I was coming off stage one day in Body Power, I think it was 2 years ago, and I had a queue of people wanting to speak to me. And they were all diabetics.
Wow.
And they were literally wanting to pick on my brain about everything, how I did this, how I did that. And, it then hit me. I was like, right, I got to do something here. I got to give back to these people. I never talked about diabetes, ever.
Nobody know when you were competing. Did people not know?
No, only my friends and stuff. I never wanted to bring it up as an excuse. And then there was a lot of other things as well. There's an awful lot of myths about diabetes.
Yes, we need to get into those. Yeah,
a lot of bodybuilders will use the drug insulin to basically as an aerogenic aid, and a lot of people associate people who are diabetic have better muscle building potential, and they're going to be bigger. And a lot of people said, oh, you're only a great bodybuilder because you take insulin, blah, blah, blah. Well, if you actually look at the facts, diabetes is a catabolic disease. It makes things harder. So we can get as advanced as we want with all the pathology and the physiology behind it. But, generally speaking, it is detrimental to any fitness effort, okay, if poorly controlled.
Okay.
That's the main thing there, if poorly controlled. If it is controlled, then it is a benefit. Okay.
So somebody coming, one of our trainers or a health professional who is listening to this, watching this video, they get somebody that is coming to their session, maybe for personal training or maybe for group exercise, ticks on the PAR-Q, type 1 diabetic. And then another person comes to the same class or the same gym and ticks on their PAR-Q, type 2 diabetes. Let's go right back to basics, Phil, and tell us what the differences are between type 2-1 and type 1.
Okay, well, first of all, we have to look at it from the point of view of actually looking at how to talk to someone with diabetes. Okay, so I know you have your gym, and there's going to be trainers in there, and they're going to be working with different people that have diabetes. Now, in England, in Europe and stuff like that, people talk to people with diabetes, they call them diabetics. Now, if you go to America and you say that normally doesn't go down too well. So I have only actually learned this as of recent.
Wow.
When I'm talking to people with diabetes, it's a person living with diabetes. Okay. It's a person with diabetes. It's not a diabetic, because you're technically terming them as a diseased individual, and it doesn't really go down too well. So the terminology is very important in how you discuss diabetes with someone, because it can apply a label and things like that. And psychologically, if you think about it, it can sort of, sound a little bit negative from a diabetic's perspective. To be honest, call me diabetic all you want. I really don't care. Okay. But that's a massive thing that I learned. So I was like communicating in all these diabetic based forums. In America, I was saying diabetic this, diabetic that. I wrote pretty much 90% of the book saying diabetic. So I had to change my ways whenever I was communicating and networking with people in America about diabetes. So that's a big, big thing. So first of all, diabetes, you asked what exactly is diabetes. Mm-hmm. And it's important to realize that there are a number of different types of diabetes. And we have to look at it from a collective point of view first. Diabetes is basically a disease where the body cannot metabolize carbohydrate appropriately, and it results in high blood sugar, or what we would call hyperglycemia. Now, that results from a defect in insulin secretion or the action of insulin on the cells. Okay, now insulin itself is a hormone that is typically produced in the pancreas, and what technically happens in someone with type 1 is that is an autoimmune disease whereby the body attacks its own cells that produce the insulin, and as a result, over time or almost suddenly, there's a degenerative effect, or it suddenly shuts off. And there are thought to be a number of different reasons behind that. Again, it's still very much early in the research. There's so much that we don't know, but it's thought to be conditions that involve leaky gut and environment. Wow. Leaky gut, as you may know, is a sign of dysbiosis or prolonged inflammation in the gut, whereby particular pathogens or germs end up coming into the system when they shouldn't. Antibodies, the body's mechanism, basically tags certain proteins as invaders, and they can resemble certain tissues or organs in the body, and as a result of that, the body can invade and attack its own cells. Yeah. And as a result of that, you get complete cessation of insulin production, and it needs to be administered with a drug for the rest of the patient's or client's life. In type 2 diabetes, we see that this typically occurs in individuals that are maybe overweight or have poor healthy practices. It can also be a result of particular medications. It can also be a result of particular environmental pollutants. And there can be a host of different reasons, as well as genetics as well. That also comes into both aspects of type 1 and type 2. Now, whenever it comes to type 2, we tend to see, if we look at the most basic fundamental stereotype of somebody who suffers from type 2, they overeat and they don't move much. Mm-hmm. So again, lifestyle can be a really good way of reducing the body fat stores. Excess body fat can interfere with the body's chemistry and the ability for it to conduct roles effectively or healthily or normally. Mm-hmm. So whenever you have I always like to talk about fat tissue and excess level of adipose tissue as a toxic sort of factory producing a lot of fumes, and it affects the area and it affects all the ecosystem around it. So if you can imagine excess levels of body fat above and beyond what are typically meant to be there, then cells don't work as well. Communication messages don't work as well. Insulin doesn't work as well. And as a result of that, there's massive buildup of glucose in the blood, and this causes problems. We'll get to that in a wee minute. Now, in terms of moving more, in terms of eating less, if you can imagine the typical individual that maybe drives a lorry and it does nothing but consume low quality, high calorie food all day long. Mm. So their energy output is very, very small. Their energy input is massive. So they're in a chronic state of fat gain, and they're in a chronic state of insulin secretion. Mm-hmm. Insulin is always being produced to accommodate the fuel. Mm-hmm. You can imagine the burden that has on the pancreas over a prolonged period of time. It will really, really significantly stress the pancreas. Now, when we incorporate things like eating less, that will reduce the load on the pancreas, or changing the type of macronutrients, changing the amount of calories, that will have an effect. Calories is a big, big thing. Overall energy balance, not just carbohydrates, because we can secrete insulin for both carbohydrate and protein. It's a high level of calories and excess energy generally that leads to obesity. And if you look at the types of food that cause obesity, it's not just carbohydrate-rich foods. It's not just protein-rich foods. It's carbohydrate, protein, and fat-rich foods together. It's the taste, it's the palatability of that. So whenever we look at somebody who doesn't move and we get them moving more, the muscle tissue literally turns into a vacuum. If you can look at muscle tissue almost like a storage house for glucose or carbohydrate, and also a vacuum for carbohydrate, especially whenever we're doing high intensity activity, such as lifting weights. So that's why lifting weights can be the biggest and best form of exercise for someone with diabetes if they're relatively in a good state of health. Mm-hmm. The reason for that is because whenever we contract the muscle fiber, it basically sucks glucose out of the bloodstream without too much assistance from insulin. So it can serve as what we call insulin mimetic. So it basically replicates what insulin does. It also as well stores more glycogen, more carbohydrates, so our ability to store glucose is increased. And as well, whenever we increase muscle mass, we increase metabolic rate. Now, if we increase metabolic rate, what happens is that we're able to burn more calories at rest. And as a result of that, the ability or the potential to store fat is reduced. So you can understand how this is beneficial. Now, that's in type 2. The same goes for type 1. It is also incredibly beneficial, but we have to remember that there's a whole host of different hormonal reactions that go on between someone with type 1 and type 2. And basically what happens is in type 1, there is no insulin produced whatsoever. In type 2, insulin is produced, but it doesn't necessarily do its job as well. Okay. Now, whenever it comes to type 1, what tends to happen is whenever somebody has a period or bout of high intensity or stressful activity, is the body produces what we call the sympathetic nervous system response, and it secretes stress hormones. These stress hormones serve a number of roles: to increase mental alertness, to get the muscle tissues ready to fire, ready to rock, and also as well to utilize fuel, create fuel and allow it to enter the bloodstream. And this typically comes from the liver. The liver is also, as well as muscle, a storage house for carbohydrate. So the liver can actually produce its own carbohydrate. We have to bear in mind that carbohydrate is not an essential nutrient, and the body can produce its own need. Now, if I produce carbohydrate and I don't secrete, or I don't have insulin function, what can tend to happen whenever we have stressful periods of activity or life events is that the liver can pump glucose into the bloodstream. And as a result of that, in the type 1 diabetic, they do not produce insulin to recirculate that glucose. So not only can we see problems with carbohydrate intake, food intake causing high blood glucose, we can also see certain activities can also cause problems with blood glucose in people with diabetes. So it's very important to understand what activities you're putting yourself through as a client, or as a coach, what you're putting your client through in order to be able to successfully manage your blood glucose.
Got it.
So those are big takeaways there in regards to exercise. But the reality is most people with type 2 diabetes that are overweight do not move enough and they eat too much. The reality is the proof is in the pudding, literally. Okay, so you got to look at it from that aspect.
Got it. Talk me through, and the trainers through who are watching, some of the medications that people are going to be on, and how that affects one, their ability to exercise, side effects with some of the medications, and how are both of them managed successfully?
Okay, well, I mean, we'll break it down into two very simple medications for type 1 and type 2. Type 1 will typically take injectable insulin. And the problem with injectable insulin is you can take too much. You take too much, you can drive yourself into a hypoglycemic state. You drive yourself into a hypoglycemic state, concentration, energy, focus, coordination, all of that goes out the window. Okay? On the other hand, you can also take too little. As a result of that, you can get hyperglycemia. When we get hyperglycemia, we can see increased levels of dehydration. There's problems with the muscle chemistry, the ability for the muscle to contract well. And also as well, we see oxidation and glycation and a whole host of different stressful events that are above and beyond their normal rates. So we see aging kick in very fast. We see implications with cell renewal. We see implications with cell growth. We see a reduction or implications with protein synthesis and an increase in protein breakdown. So we see a whole host of negative stuff going on. And diabetes was very well explained by an ancient Greek physician. Don't ask me to recall his name. I can never pronounce it. He said that basically diabetes is a disease of where the body eats itself. Okay? So if you imagine that the body can't take glucose and the nutrients out of the bloodstream because insulin is deficient, where does the body get the fuel from? And it gets that from amino acids. It gets that from ketones. It breaks down the body's cells to get energy. Now, when I said ketones there, you probably thought, well, ketogenic diet, that's okay. But it's in the wrong environment. It's in a very acidic environment with a lot of amino acids and a lot of glucose and a whole host of different things going on within the bloodstream. So ketosis from a diabetic perspective is very unhealthy. And the highest level of high blood sugar is diabetic ketoacidosis, which again is very detrimental to health and normally results in the individual passing out. Okay, it's a very acidic state. So, in terms of medication, that's for type 1. And type 2, things like glucophage or there's a whole host of normally what you tend to find is in type 2 individuals, and type 1 is that uncontrolled diabetes or obesity has led to other health implications that have other medications. So it can often be above and beyond just simple diabetic medications, and you have to realize that that could be very complex, and there may be various different side effects from that. So, you know, in terms of the general type 2 diabetes, which medication, which is known as glucose disposal agents, which are many. There's other things like SGL2, SGLT2, which again can affect like the emptying of the gut and the appetite, disposal of glucose in the urine and things like that. All of those drugs have side effects, from nausea right through to, you know, stomach discomfort, right through to, again, even possible hypoglycemia with those drugs as well. So hypoglycemia tends to be less in type 2, more in type 1, because they're taking an active compound that directly brings blood glucose level down. But again, it all depends on dosing and the frequency and the administration and the timing of the administration. So again, if you take insulin after a weight training session in a trained muscle group, it'll act incredibly fast compared to just waking up in the morning and taking it into, like, say, your thigh or a bit of body fat on your lower abdominals. So there are various different contexts there for that. But generally speaking, if you're treating someone with type 1 diabetes, make sure you're mindful of what their blood glucose reading is before they train. Make sure you ask them when was the last time you took insulin, because if they've taken it 2 minutes before they've entered the training session and their blood glucose is sitting at a relatively low range, and again, the ranges will vary, but generally when it comes to training, I like my blood glucose to be sitting around about between 4.5 to 7 millimoles per litre. And again, that measurement will differ with international clients, Americans especially. So it's very, very, very important that you look at the client's blood sugar before. You ask them, right, what have you taken before, both from an insulin perspective and a food perspective? So a bad scenario would be the following. I've just taken 10 units of my Nova Rapid by mistake, and I'm about to train with you. You need to eat food, okay? And that's based on having a normal blood glucose level. Another bad scenario would be my blood glucose is 3.8. I took insulin about 2 hours ago and I haven't eaten. Looking at that, there's a possibility for a hypo. Now, bear in mind that, as I said earlier, strength training can increase blood glucose. So again, gauge it throughout the session. There's nothing to stop you going in and taking a blood glucose level 20 minutes into the session. Assessments save lives. Assessments save time. So getting the individual with diabetes to do that can be very fruitful. An ideal situation would be something like the following. I've eaten 2 hours ago, I had my insulin 2 hours ago, and my blood sugar is 7.5 and I feel great. Another bad situation would be going into the gym and blood glucose being too high. I'm sitting at 10 to 12 millimoles per litre. The average range is normally between 4.5 and 7.8. That's the range that I like to sit around personally. And again, that may vary depending on what clinical guideline that you will look at. But if somebody comes in that's high and they go in to train, remember what I said earlier on, the stressful response of exercise will make that blood glucose higher in type 1 diabetes, and they will need insulin due to the fact they don't produce any. And when you're high, that's also stressful to the body. When you strength train on top of that, that's more stress, which can drive that blood glucose level up very fast. And with that, whenever you're high, remember, you're breaking muscle protein down, you're reducing muscle protein synthesis, and you're causing implications with your health. So it's very important that you learn to bring that back and that you learn to correct that insulin level. And that can be done by taking an administrative shot. And most diabetics are trained in how to do that when they're first diagnosed. Okay. In terms of type 2, type 2s usually don't test blood glucose. But again, ask them simple questions. So for example, how do you feel today? What do you feel dizzy? Do you feel tired? When was the last time you ate? Those kinds of things. It's a completely different context. Whenever you're using that injectable drug insulin, blood glucose can plummet incredibly fast, and it's very important to be mindful of that.
Got it. So talk us through your book, Phil. Tell us about what you've told us, why you decided to read it. Show us it, and talk us through some of the information that would really help.
So this is the big bad boy here.
Oh my gosh, it's like the yellow pages.
Yeah, it's a big book. It literally covers every single aspect of getting in shape with diabetes, both type 1 and type 2. And it isn't just a wishy-washy guide of step 1, step 2, step 3. It goes into the evidence-based, most up-to-date evidence-based information on everything: nutrition, strength training, lifestyle, medication, supplementation, that there is to do with diabetes. So I basically wrote this book from the perspective of an obsessed teenager that really wanted to get in shape that had no information to do it. So everything is in that book from that perspective. So literally, and I mean, I've sent it, the amount of emails that I get every single day about the book from clinicians, health professionals all across the world. Yesterday, I had a guy from California. The day before, it was a guy from Birmingham. You know, the information is literally getting everywhere. And, you know, I had it proofread. I went through it. I took a great deal of responsibility ensuring that the content was accurate, well balanced, and not opinionated. And anytime my personal opinion was expressed in that, it is clearly stated. You know, so there's a lot of information in that, and I know now, having published that on the 20th of October last year, it has literally blown up and gone all around the world, and I'm getting pictures of, you know, coffee tables in New York, the book appearing right through to people walking the streets of Ethiopia, Instagram.
I love that.
So it's crazy. And, you know, to think that I didn't want to write that was, I'm very, very mindful of things that now that not only you don't want to do, you need to do. So that's taught me a big life lesson with that. And, you know, on top of that, the book as well is leading into a strength training community for people with diabetes that want to lift and build muscle, perform well, and be incredibly strong. So we've got some great people that want to contribute content for that, and that's going to be a member site. There's also a load of free articles and stuff on diabeticmuscleandfitness.com. That's where you can buy the book, or you can get it on Amazon. It's available in ebook and paperback. But literally,
your website, Phil, is that your personal website? Is that where people can find out more about you?
My personal website is phil-graham.com.
Okay.
And the diabetic muscle and fitness one for the book is highly specific to that side of things, because I also have quite a big role in the fitness industry, and I try not to overpopulate that with diabetic related stuff, because I have a lot of diabetic people that follow me, and then again a lot of people that are in the general fitness sector that follow me as well. So I try to keep the content separate. And many of you may know me through my podcast, which is interviewed quite a lot of people from various different aspects in the fitness industry, business, the whole way through to nutrition, training, you name it, powerlifting, the whole lot. That's where most of you will probably know me from. And then I've obviously been on a lot of other different podcasts and stuff as well over the years. So yeah, I mean, you know, as I say, my role was as a main fitness educator, and now it's come into this diabetic specialist type one who strength trains and is able to get in shape. And, you know, I love the fact that I get messages every single day saying that I've helped someone, that I've taught them something they didn't know. So for example, that issue we talked about, going into the gym and blood sugars spiking up, while that may not be an issue for you, for someone who's had diabetes for 15 years and can't understand why their blood sugars is going up when they strength train, and it's complicating their control and making them feel like crap, that's quite a useful piece of information to know. And, you know, I'm more than happy to have been able to share that with people, and if it's helping change people's lives for the better, that's all I'm about. So
amazing, I love that. And you're very active on the socials. You're very active
I've
on.
actually been less active in the last few weeks, being so busy. But yes, I'm fairly active on mostly Instagram. I don't really use my Facebook pages too much anymore. But again, I have my podcast, I have my email list, I have a host of different things. I have started a YouTube. So I've done 3 vlogs so far, and they're called Type 1 Coffee and Kilos. And they cover both diabetic, both fitness education. They've gone down incredibly well so far. On top of that, everything's been going very, very well. So you can find me everywhere. Now, over the next, where are we? We're in March. Probably after May, you will see a lot more of me on social media. Once I get myself back in shape, I took a little bit of a break there for a while, gained a little bit of weight. Don't get me wrong, for those of you that don't train and you look at me, you'll say, what are you talking about? But I have incredibly high standards when it comes to keeping myself in shape, and I have had other priorities in the last 6 months that have taken place on top of that. So, yeah, you'll be seeing a lot more of things like
I love that. And you're at Body Power, so if anybody's at Body Power, they can go and say hello to you.
And I'm looking forward to seeing you, Rachel.
Yes, you will be. I will be straight over with my book to be signed immediately.
Yes, I'll be signing it for you, so don't worry about that. So, guys, if you want to get a hold of the book, you can head to diabeticmuscleandfitness.com and grab it. Yeah. If you know someone with diabetes, or you even have diabetes yourself, this will be an incredible gift for you. I mean, there's a lot of time and effort that's gone into that. A lot of, let's just say, scrambled up bits of paper, smashed computer screens.
Oh my gosh.
A few lost friendships over that. And,
your relationship's still intact. That's the most thing.
It's still intact. So, yeah, tested that too. So, yeah, everything is good with that. So, yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. I'd like to thank you so much for your time today. It's really appreciated. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me on. I know how much time out of your day this takes too, and I appreciate you contacting me. So thank you very, very much, Rachel. Thank you.
You're welcome.